Ladies and gentlemen. God damn it!
Welcome back, everybody. It's the NFL Exporter live on Raw Radio. If you're just tuning in, today we're doing a special edition of the Exporter Sports Talk Show where we're breaking down the entire AFC conference for NFL football. We're now going to move to the AFC North, and we're going to start with last year's division winner, the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals have a plethora of weapons on offense, starting with top receiver A.J. Green. Green had 98 catches for over 1,400 yards last year with 12 TDs. He's certainly probably the best wide receiver in the NFL besides Calvin Johnson. You love what he can do, especially going up and catching the ball and catching deep routes. This guy has great route running. Definitely one of my favorite players in the NFL. Opposite him, I really like Marvin Jones. He's a third-year player who's really underrated. Had 10 TD catches last year. And then they also have Mohamed Sanu, who's a pretty nifty wide receiver and has been in the system for a while as well. Tyler Eifert is in his second year at tight end from the University of Notre Dame. I certainly like his upside. And you have the veteran Jermaine Gresham, who is still an effective player, but he's got to do a better job of holding on to the football as well as cutting down on penalties. When you look in the backfield, Giovanni Bernard is in his second year out of University of North Carolina. He's one of the more exciting players in the NFL. He does a good job at running the football, but is also very effective on screens and catching the football out of the backfield. I'll be excited to see him on the football field this year. And then Ben Jarvis Green Ellis is a veteran who's still a tough runner who can churn out yards. And then QB Andy Dalton, who just received a new contract. He's got a lot of pressure on him. He's put up great numbers in the regular season, improving each year, but he's got to cut down on turnovers and silly mistakes at the most inopportune time. Also, in Dalton's 3-year career, he's yet to win a playoff game in the 3 years that the Bengals have made it to the playoffs, and he's actually played poor in those games, so he's got to step his game up. When I look at this Bengals offensive line, that's probably my only question mark. They have not been consistent opening up holes in the running game, and they certainly have not been consistent when it's come to pass protection. If Andy Dalton is going to be under a lot of duress, which we've seen a lot of times in past years, this Bengals team may have another first-round exit, and I know that they certainly don't want that. On the defensive side of the football, there's some changes. Now, on their front four, Geno Atkins, coming into last year, was highly regarded as one of the top 3 or 4 defensive tackles in the NFL. Now, he had a ACL injury, which put him out last year, and he certainly needs to get back to 100% from that. So we have to monitor him and make sure that he's going to be the same dominant player that he was prior to the injury. They also lost defensive end Michael Johnson, who was a pass rush specialist to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, they do still have Carlos Dunlap, but compared to what was coming into last year, which was definitely a strong suit for the Bengals, this year we have to wait to see how things play out. When we look at the linebackers, Ray Malaluga is a guy that I definitely like, but he struggled staying on the field with injuries. He's got to do that. When he's in the lineup, they're certainly a much better ball club, especially at stopping the run. And then you have to love Vontaze Burfict, a late-round draft pick who has really blossomed, got on the map in 2012, and just kept it going last year, and is definitely one of the best outside linebackers in the NFL. He can get it done stopping a run or dropping back into pass coverage. He's definitely one of the more exciting players in the NFL on the defensive side of the football. And then when you look at their secondary, you still have veterans Leon Hall and Terrence Newman. They did a great job, the Bengals did this year, in going out and drafting cornerback DeQuez Denard from Michigan State. He won the Best Cornerback Award in college last year, and through just 2 weeks of training camp, head coach Marvin Lewis has already said Denard is the best rookie cornerback he's ever seen, and that's saying a lot coming from Lewis, who's been around the NFL for more than 20 years. When you look on the back end, Reggie Nelson is definitely a mainstay and staple, making plays at the safety position for this defense. Overall, I really like what Cincinnati has. You're just going to have to shore up their the trenches on the offense and defensive side of the football, and Andy Dalton is the guy who their season hopes hinge on. We certainly hope he can step up and do better than he's done the last couple years in the playoffs. But as I mentioned, this division is much tougher this year. Next, you have the Baltimore Ravens. Now, last year, the Ravens unexpectedly had a hit to their star player, Ray Rice, who coming into last year was a guy who was known to be always amongst the league leaders in all-purpose yards, a dual threat, gaining over 1,000 yards rushing and doing a lot of damage in the passing game. Last year, Rice had the worst year of his career. Couldn't even make it to 700 rushing yards, averaged a measly 3 yards per carry. And then we know that in the offseason, Rice has gotten into some off-the-field issues, so you wonder if his focus is going to be the same. That is going to be a key part, because this is a player that the Ravens heavily relied on over the past couple of years, including 2012 when they won the Super Bowl. They also have running back Bernard Pierce, who at this point in preseason, some people are saying has outplayed Rice. I think that Rice is the better player, but again, when you have off-the-field issues going on, there's no telling if you're fully there and engaged mentally. But the Ravens do have two capable running backs. Now look, last year it was Baltimore's overall running game that sputtered. A lot of that we put on the offensive line as well as the offensive coordinator. A lot of plays that the Ravens ran last year were out of that pistol formation, and to me, I don't understand why you would run an offense like that when your quarterback is no threat to run the football. So with that being said, they brought in Gary Kubiak, who was over the head coach for the Houston Texans. He runs a very effective zone blocking scheme. We'll see if Baltimore can implement that into their system and be more effective running the football, which is something they desperately need to do. Now, Joe Flacco has a couple new trinkets at wide receiver. Now, we know that Torrey Smith is certainly one of the top 20 or so wide receivers in the NFL. I really like what he brings to the table. A speed guy, but has certainly each year worked on running more routes, not just being a deep ball guy. He had to especially do that when possession receiver Anquan Bolden left last year to the San Francisco 49ers. They brought in Steve Smith. We're used to seeing Smith in teal and silver out in Carolina. He's with Baltimore now this year. We know that Smith has lost a step, but I think this is a good situation for him because he won't be the team's #1 wide receiver, which will take a little pressure off of him, and I still think that he can win some one-on-one matchups. Dennis Pitta is a very good tight end. He missed a lot of last year due to injury. He's back into the equation. He's certainly one of Joe Flacco's favorite targets. And then they still have second-year guy Marlon Brown and veteran Jacoby Jones. And so I think that Joe Flacco has a much better supporting cast around him this year if the Ravens do have to pass the football more than they want to, if the running game isn't being effective. On the defensive side of the football, Haloti Ngata is a guy who's got to step his play back up. Ngata suffered an injury a couple years ago, and I just didn't see him back to his normal form last year. If he can get back playing to a high level, that does wonders because he's certainly an anchor in the trenches on the defensive line. The Ravens also did a nice job by going out and drafting Tim Jernigan from the University of Florida State. He's a young player who did really well in OTAs, and I think he'll get a lot of playing time. Certainly has a chance to be an impact rookie. The Ravens still have two of the better outside linebackers in the league with Terrell Suggs and Elvis Dumervil. We know, especially in passing situations, those two guys definitely bring the ruckus from the edges. On the inside, the Ravens went out and drafted C.J. Mosley. He was regarded the best inside linebacker coming out of college this year from University of Alabama. Heard nothing but good things about him thus far in training camp. And then they also have veteran Darryl Smith. Now in the secondary, last year, Ladarius Webb missed extensive time due to injury. He's back in the lineup. He may be a little bit small in stature, but he certainly has a big heart. That should definitely help the Ravens secondary. And then Jimmy Smith is on the corner, another guy who was very highly touted coming out of University of Colorado a couple years ago. If both of them can stay on the field, I certainly like the progress that they'll make over the season and be a nice tandem to stop opposing wide receivers. And then at safety, this is certainly the area where the Ravens have to get better at. A lot of inexperience last year. Second-year guy Matt Elam from the University of Florida, he certainly got to play a lot better on the back end. Overall, when I look at this Ravens team, I think they'll be right there battling the Bengals to win this division. Next, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers are revamped and looking to get back into winning that division crown and trying to get back into the playoffs again this year. Now, last year they got off to a slow start, but were able to turn things around and go 6-2 down the stretch and barely missed the playoffs by just one game, the last game of the season. We all know that Big Ben Roethlisberger is definitely one of the best playmakers in the NFL. Certainly doesn't get the acclaim of a Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, but he is a two-time Super Bowl winner. And like I said, we know all too well with Big Ben, the play is never over. If you don't hog tie this guy and get him to the ground, he can make a throw pretty much from anywhere on the football field. Definitely very fun watching Ben Roethlisberger. Now, I think the wide receiver position is an area of concern. Last year, in 2012, they lost Mike Wallace. This year, they've lost Emmanuel Sanders. Antonio Brown certainly had an all-pro caliber season last year with over 100 catches for 1,499 yards and 8 TDs. But I know the defenses are going to pay him a lot more attention this year, and they're going to have to get some production out of their other receivers who don't have too much experience. Marcus Wheaton is in his second year, and aside from that, you have a lot of unproven players. Now, Dre Archer is a guy that they drafted this year in the later rounds from Kent State. He's a running back. They're certainly going to look to use him as sort of a hybrid, just looking to get the ball in his hands any way possible and get him out in space. He's been having a great training camp so far, so you certainly want to keep your eye on him. And then when we look at the running backs, I love Le'Veon Bell, who's in his second year out of Michigan State, had over 800 yards and 8 TDs last year. Certainly think he's in line for a big year. And they also brought in LeGarrette Blount from the New England Patriots. We know that bruising running back can certainly put the yards up. That is certainly going to be the identity of the Steelers, who also are getting some key linemen back. Last year they were without Pro Bowl caliber center Marquise Pouncey, as well as David DeCastro, and so both of those guys will be back on the front lines, along with tackle Marcus Gilbert. And so I think overall that the Steelers being just more cohesive in the trenches will help their offense out a lot. And then we can't forget the veteran Heath Miller, who never was a speed guy, but certainly has sure hands and is still a nice threat in the red zone. Overall, I expect for Pittsburgh's offense to be more balanced and possibly even a little bit more efficient, even though they don't have the big-time playmakers at wide receiver. On the defensive side of the football, we know that Dick LeBeau is one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. Now, things have changed. This is certainly not on paper the same Pittsburgh Steelers team that we used to know with the likes of Lamar Woodley and Casey Hampton and guys, James Harrison, guys like that. But they do still have inside linebacker Lawrence Timmons, who's certainly one of the better inside linebackers in the NFL. They still have Ike Taylor at cornerback, and also Troy Polamalu. They certainly will need those veterans to play at a high level to make up for some of the players that aren't there anymore. And then Jarvis Jones is a guy who they're placing a lot of expectations on. Drafted him last year at the University of Georgia to take the place of James Harrison. Didn't have too well of a rookie year. He's got to work hard and get better fast. This Steelers defense is getting older, and we're seeing a lot of name changes. Ryan Clark was a mainstay there at safety the past couple years. He's another guy who's not there anymore. Overall, I think that Pittsburgh is more mentally tougher this year. Mike Tomlin is certainly one of the best coaches in the NFL, and I think that this division certainly is going to come down to that three-team race with the Bengals, the Ravens, and the Steelers. So we'll see how that plays out. The last team in the division is the Cleveland Browns. The Browns right now are waiting to hear what's going to happen with their star wide receiver, Josh Gordon. Gordon led the NFL in receiving yards last year. Certainly a special young talent, but has gotten to a lot of trouble off the field in his early career. So we're waiting to see if and when he'll be suspended and how long. His suspension definitely holds a lot of implications on his offense, because if he's out of the lineup, outside of returning tight end Jordan Cameron, it's going to be a whole new set of wide receivers, which, developing chemistry with their quarterback may take a little time. Now, those wide receivers will be Nate Burleson, as well as veteran Miles Austin. And then they brought in Lavelle Hawkins from the Cincinnati Bengals. So all of these guys certainly weren't, your top tier wide receivers like a Calvin Johnson or a Brandon Marshall or somebody of that caliber, but they're going to have to make the best of what they can do if Gordon is out the lineup, because he's certainly up there with those guys that I just mentioned. When we look in the backfield, Cleveland brought over Ben Tate. I'm not too sold on Cleveland's running game as well. I was never really high on Tate in Houston. I felt he came in behind Arian Foster and did some good things, but now he's the lead guy, and I just don't see it. I think rookie running back Terrence West has an opportunity to beat him out in preseason to get that starting spot. So that's a running back a position battle that we're certainly going to keep our eyes on, as well as, of course, veteran QB Brian Hoyer and rookie quarterback Johnny Manziel. Both guys played pretty well in the preseason opener. That's a wide open race, but again, the success of this offense is going to largely hinge on Josh Gordon being in there. If Gordon is out of that lineup, I expect for this offense to struggle, and it's going to be kind of difficult to put up a lot of points. On the defensive side of the football, the Browns lost a couple key players as well. DeQuell Jackson, who was one of the best inside linebackers for many years in Cleveland, is now in Indianapolis. And then safety TJ Ward is now in Denver. With that being said, Cleveland still has Big Phil Taylor at defensive tackle. They have Paul Kruger at outside linebacker, as well as Barkevius Mingle, who had a nice rookie season out of the University of LSU last year. They still have Joe Hayden, who's one of the top lockdown corners in the NFL. And then at the other defensive back position, they went out this year and drafted Justin Gilbert from Oklahoma State, and he's playing really well in preseason too. And then to replace Ward, Cleveland brought over Dante Whitner of the San Francisco 49ers. Whitner is not the best at pass coverage, but is certainly a big-time hitter. Overall, I think this Cleveland Browns team, especially with the new coaching staff, is in transition mode. I think this year they'll be competitive, but I think they're really in a mode where they're just going to be looking at what they have on the lineup, on the roster, and then start making the proper adjustments to move forward with the new team next year in regards to having a new coaching staff and such a young crop of players. All right, that wraps up the AFC North. Stay tuned. It's the NFLExporter Sports Talk Show live on Raw Radio. We'll be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen,